Welcome to the Barrel Room Chronicles. I'm Carrie Moynihan, a certified bourbon steward, former bartender, and all-around whiskey aficionado. I travel the world to explore whiskey from every avenue. For the last 20 years, I've been helping others tell their stories through television, film, and other media. But now I'm taking my love for whiskey and my experience in the entertainment industry to uncover the fascinating stories of the water of life. So kick off your shoes, pour yourself a dram, and join me for this episode of Barrel Room Chronicles. It is 5 o'clock somewhere, and you've tuned into episode 4 of BRC. For those of you watching this episode on our website, YouTube, or Spotify, you're in for a treat, because in today's Whiskey Whereabouts, I'm live and in person at Frey Ranch in Fallon, Nevada. I'll catch up with Ashley and Colby Frey about their barrel room pick, their new single grain releases, and their glass candle upcycling program. Then in Tales from the Still, I'll be at the still on the ranch when Colby gives me a private tour of the distillery. Lastly, I'll chat with Chef Louise Leonard about the Frey's new single grain oat whiskey in World of Wheezy. Stay with us.
If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. With everything you need all in one place. Let me explain. It's free. Anchor has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on listening platforms like Spotify, Apple, and more. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Well, hi guys. It's such a pleasure to be here on the farm, doing a little Whiskey Whereabouts.
Yeah, thanks for visiting us.
Yes.
I appreciate
Thank you for making the trip.
Well, as you know, we were trying to come on Saturday, which seemed to be a very big day for you guys, but AD had a very bad car accident, so we couldn't make it. But tell us about Saturday. What was Saturday all about?
Yeah, so on Saturday we released the first of our single grain series, which is part of our innovation here on the farm. We released 100% oat whiskey and then 100% wheat whiskey. And they're aged 6.5 years, and we released them in the fun little 375 bottles, which
Fantastic.
turned out great. Yeah.
That's awesome. So tell me, how many people were able to make it past the freeway debacle?
Oh, I don't think anybody did, to be honest.
We had a lot of people coming from Sacramento, from San Francisco, San Jose, all over the place, and none of them could make it.
So how many people actually got to be, came in from Nevada?
We had a couple hundred people.
Wow.
For sure, yeah.
Wow.
There was a line. The first person showed up. We didn't open until 11. The first person showed up at 6:45 a.m.
Oh my. Wow. And that was for the tasting room?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My goodness. So how many bottles did you go through the tasting room that day?
I think we sold close to 200 bottles of wheat and 175 of oat.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot.
That's awesome.
Plus the bourbon and rye, and people got to take the tour, which is always nice to show them around.
Yes, the tour is awesome. The tasting room is really nice, but it doesn't look like it could fit that many people.
Yeah.
So how far out was this line?
So we opened our doors an hour early whenever we do a single barrel, or in this case, the single grain release. Mm-hmm. So we hold people at the door. These are our diehard fans. They just take a sip and they purchase. So nice. We're able to cycle them through in that first hour. Then when our normal tasting room hours start at noon, we can get our visitors in, and it's just an overall better experience for everybody.
Fantastic.
But yeah,
25 or 30 people in there.
Okay.
But yeah,
that seems about right.
Yeah.
I'm noticing your little John Deere wagon over there. Is that one of your kids' former toys?
No, so we wanted displays that kind of represented the ranch.
For our retail partners.
For retail stores and everything. So we thought, what better way to do that than have a little mini tractor?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, we're still in the experiment phase.
It was just an idea, so I got online and ordered it.
Cute.
But our son has a couple of those, and even battery or electric ones that drive around and everything.
Nice.
Yeah, he loves those.
So right now, that's what I was saying. I just noticed before I left LA that I have finally seen the bourbon in our liquor stores. I didn't see the rye yet, though. But I know
we just launched. So we just launched the rye. It's an allocated product. So 80% of our production is in the bourbon, only 15% in the rye. So when we do release it, it typically goes really fast.
Yeah.
And we also
I mentioned, it's allocated.
Release it 6 months after the bourbon, because we're a bourbon distillery. We don't want the rye to become the primary product, and so usually we'll release in a market, and then 6 months later we'll release the rye, which is about right now in LA. So you should be.
Good.
You'll see
Maybe
some.
when I get back, there will be some. I do remember when we had you on the podcast before, you guys sent us a little sample, and that rye was very good.
Yeah.
And I was very sad that it was so small. At the time, I think that was all you had left because there wasn't.
It sells out fast. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about this whiskey range here and what you've got going on. So that's the new one. Mm-hmm. And then we have your rye.
This is a fun, pour bottles. We don't throw them away. We upcycle them into things like these grain jars. Awesome. We also have the candle program in the tasting room where we use all the leftover glass.
I tell everybody that's like a DIY bourbon bottle. It's like the IKEA version where you got to do it yourself.
That's awesome. Yeah. Very awesome. So tell me about this candle stuff. What's going on with the candles?
So I started the candle program in the tasting room because I had a really hard time throwing bottles away. They're just so beautiful that it's tough to put them in the garbage. And I was able to find a company that can keep the label retained and actually turn them into candles. So we send them the bottles from the tasting room, or we have a lot of customers that bring us back bottles now. And it's been a great upcycling program.
That's very cool.
Mm-hmm. And then this is our single barrel. So we do have a really fun single barrel program where we kick out some of our favorite barrels that show extreme characteristics. So maybe they're really fruity, maybe they're really earthy or woodsy, or that caramel bomb. And they go into our single barrel program, which are all store picks.
Right.
And they're all bottled at barrel proof. So like that one right there is 126.3 proof. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So out of all the barrels that you've done barrel picks for, is there one that stood out for you that you were like, wow, I really don't want to sell this one. I want to keep it for us?
Well, we did keep it. We sold it in the tasting room. I mean, we didn't keep the barrel for us, but we kept it for our tasting room. And it was barrel 589, and it was just a cherry bomb.
Oh,
so good. Yeah. What about you? Which one do you like?
I don't know. I go all over the place, but we had several that I really liked.
1001 was really good. That was like spicy.
It was like spicy and almost like earthy, but also almost had like Scotch characteristics to it.
It was really well rounded.
Yeah, it was. 420 was really good.
This is number 420. This is number 22, which is
our first one.
Our very first, yeah.
Very cool. I love how the label is backwards on this, where it's black.
Yeah, it just looks really nice and premium.
It does.
And then our rye whiskey is 100% rye, which to be rye whiskey, it only has to be 51% or more rye.
100% is hard.
Yeah, it's really hard.
How many spillages over in the mash tank did you have?
A couple at the first. So.
Some big ones that we've learned.
Yeah, so it was really tough. One time we thought we were going to be smart, put a little bit of anti-foam agent on the top of it.
No.
And went home, came back, and there was like 3 inches of rye, like slime on the entire floor of the entire barrel fermentation room.
Wow.
Yeah.
Eesh, that didn't work. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, so tell us what else is going to be coming down the pipelines for you now that you just had this big launch. What's the next big thing? Anything before Christmas?
Nothing before Christmas. We've been really swamped. But as far as releases, I'm not going to confirm it, but we may be doing a single barrel rye.
Yeah, single barrel proof rye, maybe, but that'll be next year. That'll probably be the next one. And then we have all of our innovative stuff. So a lot of people ask, are we going to do secondary aging in barrels, barrel aging, secondary aging? And we don't, there's nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of really good ones. But for us, we want to showcase the grains that are in our whiskeys. And so we have 5% of our production is fun stuff like 100% corn, 100% wheat, 100% barley, 100% rye. And then we have 100% oat. We have Scotch styles where we smoked the barley to kind of be as, kind of a Scotch style whiskey. We have a quad malt where wheat, rye, barley, and corn are all malted in the whole mash bill. We have corn malt. We have rye malt. We have a smoked oat and corn. We have 5-grain bourbons with oat as a 5th grain.
Wow.
We have 4-grain bourbons where we replace the wheat in our traditional mash bill with oats. One where we replace the rye in our traditional bourbon with oats. All kinds of fun stuff that we'll kind of have in the pipeline for the next few years.
So the all malted one, do you malt those all together at the same time, or you malt them individually?
All individually. Okay. Yeah, we malt them individually. So it's malted corn, it's a 4-grain, all malted in the same mash bill as our bourbon. So you can kind of taste what does it taste like when all the grains are malted, compared to not malted, and it's kind of fun to taste them and see the differences.
But a lot of those will be tasting room only, so people have to
check out here.
Yeah. Come out to Fallon.
It's worth the trip, folks. I'm telling you. All right. Well, thanks so much for letting us come out today.
Yeah, you're
thank
welcome.
you for coming.
Up next, I'll take a private tour of the Frey Ranch Distillery in this week's Tales from the Still. From the beginning to the end of the whiskey making process, Colby showed me where they make the magic happen. Our first stop was the malting house, where they use a malting drum rather than a floor to germinate the grains.
Sprout it a little bit. We stop any future growth by drying it, which is what we're doing right now. This drum's really warm. We're pumping in hot air to dry and heat, take the humidity out of the grain, so it'll store for an extended period of time.
Then we were off to the main production house, where the mashing, fermenting, and distilling takes place. Currently, the distillery has 1 mash tun, 4 fermenters, and a beer well. They also have a dewatering screw outside the building, where the spent grain is separated from the liquid and sent to the dairy across the way to feed the animals.
And if you look way over there, we have a couple thousand sheep on the hillside. Like 2,200. So all this goes to the dairy next door. We just take it with that John Deere tractor.
In the same building, the still house sits proudly in front and can be seen through the tasting room windows. Here, one finds 2 column stills and 1 1,000-gallon copper pot still. The Freys run their spirits through both column stills first to strip the alcohol from the mash, allowing them to put more per batch into the pot still, where they cut the heads, hearts, and tails. They say this process allows them to get the quality of the pot still while also getting the volume of the continuous still. And from there, we were off to the rickhouses. The original rickhouse sits towards the front of the property and houses 1,456 barrels. When they outgrew that one, they added 2 more rickhouses behind it that hold 8,400 barrels each.
We have a couple more that we're filling right now. We just pulled out a bunch of whiskey in these spots right here for our next batch of bourbon.
In the back rickhouses, we saw the rows of barrels that had been recently pulled to create their next batch of bourbon. These guys have some age marks on them. And finally, we concluded our tour in the tasting room, where I got to taste some of these amazing spirits.
So this is the 100% wheat.
Cilantro. Oh, that's kind of lovely. That is.
Aged 6.5 years.
It's got a good brick quality to it.
Yeah.
It's delicious. This is like a Happy Maple style.
You can really taste the oak in there too, huh?
Yeah.
I think our extreme aging, that hot summers and cold winters, really make it age faster than it really does.
It's a nice leg on that. I love legs. As you probably noticed from the podcast, I talk about the legginess of my drinks.
Yeah, that's that non-chill filter. It really keeps a lot of those oils in there. And it went through a crazy transformation. Right after we distilled it, it tasted like blueberries. Like 6 months later, it started tasting like bacon. 6 months after that, it started tasting like oatmeal cookies. And now it's got this really like earthy kind of oatmeal flavor, and like especially the nose.
You should have a little porridge with this.
Yeah.
I would have loved to taste it when it's blueberries.
Yeah.
Bacon.
So I think it'd be fun to do a vertical where we have like a no age, 6 months, 1 year, 2 year, you know?
That's fantastic.
It's also aged 6.5 years. Is that interesting and different, huh?
Mm-hmm. This gentleman in Ireland is doing his PhD in ghost whiskey,
Uh-huh.
and he's gone back and gotten all the recipes, not all, but like as many as he could find, of Irish whiskeys. So they have all these recipes, and he said you'd be surprised how many were oat-based. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
So
I think
I
back
was
then,
looking forward to tasting this.
yeah, back then it had a lot to do not only with flavor, but also with what was grown near them. You know, you couldn't haul it in from around the world or across the country or anything like that. So if somebody was growing oats nearby, they used oats, you know, or wheat or rye or whatever.
That was just beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is the rye. And this is 100% rye?
Mm-hmm.
And is this part of the single grain series as well?
It is, but we didn't bottle it in small bottles.
Oh, you did
But I
that?
think we're going to, because then we can have maybe like a eventually we can have like a 6-pack.
This is great too.
We really wanted to bottle 100% rye because then you can taste it and know exactly what you're tasting. Versus if we put other grain in there, you kind of wonder what flavor profiles contributing to what. You know,
Right.
This is 100% rye.
And what's the proof on this?
100 proof, bottled and bottled.
Ah, B&B.
Yeah. It's funny when we make oat, we get 2 bottles per batch. That's a 5,000
2
gallon
bottles?
tank. 2 barrels.
Oh, I'm like,
Yeah,
damn.
2 bottles. That's a really low. No, I'm sorry. 2 barrels. When we do bourbon, we get 11 barrels per batch, and so the yield is so low. It's so expensive to make because oats are actually 60% hulls. Hulls are like the protective coating around the grain itself, and so we just don't get much yield out of the oat whiskey itself.
How many different expressions do you put oats in?
So we have a smoked oat and rye that we haven't bottled yet. We have a 5-grain bourbon with oat in it. We have 4-grain bourbons with oat in replace of the wheat, and we have 4-grain bourbons with oat in place of the rye in our traditional bourbon recipes. So quite a few,
That's awesome.
but it's a fun grain. It's totally different than anything else.
And when was that smoked oat come out?
Probably in 2 years. So we made that
I'll be
probably
back
4
in 2
years ago. Yeah.
I'll be back before that. But I'll be definitely back too.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Solange about.
Cheers.
World of Wheezy is up next. Stay with us.
If you like what you've seen on BRC, you'll love what's coming soon in the Barrel Room Parlor. As a member, you'll have exclusive access to various spin-off series, including The Cutting Room Floor and the Telly Award-winning series Kindred Spirits. To create your membership, visit www.barrelroomchronicles.com and click on Become a Member. Once you have chosen your membership level, you'll be able to enjoy all the extra content it has to offer. You'll even be able to participate with the show by commenting on videos and other posts. Don't wait. Sign up today for exclusive content in the Barrel Room Parlor.
Hey, Louise, nice to have you back. How you doing today?
I am great. Great to be here. How are you, Carrie?
I'm good. Well, as you know, over the holidays, I got to go to Fallon, Nevada and visit Ashley and Colby Frey. So I got to go there, and Colby gave me this great tour. Then I had to sit down with both of them, kind of recapping some stuff since the last time we talked to them on Spirits of Whiskey. And then Colby and I went to the tasting room, and I got to taste all these new expressions that they have out. So I was able to come back with a tiny little 375 bottle because that's all they have sold, because it's a very, small batch, very small batch of the oat whiskey. So I thought I'd see what you thought of it.
I loved it. I think this is the first oat whiskey I've probably ever had. I'm pretty positive that's the case. It was super interesting. It was familiar. Like I tasted it, I'm like, okay, this is familiar, but it's just that a little bit different, let's say. And I immediately, upon tasting it, I felt like there was a nice little sweetness to it. It was very drinkable to me. And I immediately thought, okay, it's made from oats, and why not have it in a breakfast porridge?
Yes. Oh, I was hoping you'd say that.
Like, why not? I mean, I think if you got some really good steel cut oats, you could even mix some steel cut oats with other grains. I like millet. There's all different types of grains that you can have, other than just oats. But clearly we want to have some oats in that porridge. So I was thinking, of a breakfast porridge, just simmer down with some of this whiskey in the water and the oats and some cream, and let that simmer and get all delicious. And then, then I'm like, well, why not just double up on the whiskey and saute some fruit? I mean, it could be any type of fruit, berries, whatever it is you like, could be apples. I remember as a kid, we would go to the apple orchard. And so we always had a lot of apples in the fall, and my mom would cook them down with a whole bunch of butter and cinnamon and sugar. And then we would put that on top of oatmeal.
That sounds
so
great.
We kind of ate it on a lot of things. It was multi-purpose. Like sometimes we would eat it with like pork chops in a savory way, but then in the morning it would just be with oatmeal. And I'm like, oh my gosh, if you cooked some apples with some of this whiskey also, and you had the whiskey porridge plus the whiskey apples.
Oh yeah.
On top of it, and a lot of butter and a lot, I like maple syrup on oatmeal, but brown sugar is great, or honey, or whatever type of sweetener. I mean, molasses, sorghum, all of that.
What I was thinking as you said maple syrup, I was totally thinking of that Pappy and Company syrup that we talked about on Spirits of Whiskey.
Yes.
That stuff would be amazing.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I like to keep things funky from time to time. I think the addition of even hot sauce would be kind of interesting as well. So you would have the earthiness of the oats, and you would have the sweetness from the apples, and like a little touch of chili, like a fresh, like Fresno chili, or any whatever your favorite hot sauce is would be great too. Like, especially with maple, like chilies and maple are really good together.
My niece got me a couple different whiskey flavored hot sauces for Christmas. And I've been having a lot of fun experimental stuff going on with those. It's pretty fun.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah. So I really enjoyed this oat whiskey. It was certainly a unique experience in my whiskey sampling these days.
Yeah. And when I was at the distillery, I was telling Colby when we were drinking, we're drinking at the tasting room. I said, oat whiskey. I said, that's so crazy that you just came out with one, because I just interviewed for episode 2, Mr. O'Connor, who is actually researching ghost whiskeys of Ireland, basically all of the stuff that was, lost after Prohibition and the wars over there, and their Irish whiskey just went down from, hundreds of distilleries to 3. And he's researching all of these things. And he said, they used to use a lot of oats. And I was like, what? And then it was like literally like a couple of weeks after I talked to him that I went up to Fallon, and I was like, oh yes, I want to try this, because I was totally intrigued when I talked to Fanon about it. So very glad that I was able to taste it. And I kind of want to send a sample over to Fanon and see what he thinks.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it makes sense, especially in Ireland. I mean, there's a lot of oats that are grown there, to me, it makes absolute perfect sense. And also just from a cooking perspective, in recent years, I have seen on a lot of restaurant menus, a lot more savory applications of oats. So savory porridges with, served with meat or seafood or whatever. And that could easily be done with this whiskey as well. That's I think for a lot of people probably easier to wrap their head around than if you were to say, hey, who wants some oatmeal at 8 o'clock in the morning? It's got whiskey in it.
I know. Right. Okay, great. Well,
Maybe
next time
we're having on our typical Monday before work, but listen, on the weekends and you've had a hard week, there ain't nothing wrong with that.
I know. Sometimes I kind of miss the lockdown because, any time of day was good, but now it's like, oh, we're back to work. We have to kind of,
yeah, I think people definitely were much looser about their,
their 5 o'clock hour.
What was acceptable, and it's 5 o'clock somewhere, which is true.
That is my opening line for this show. It's 5 o'clock somewhere, and you've tuned in to Barrel Room Chronicles.
I think you do you, and if you doing you means having some whiskey oatmeal in the morning, then you do you, boo. That's it.
Yep, I think. Is tomorrow Saturday? Oh, no, but this Saturday, I think I'll try that. That sounds good. All right, Louise. Well, next time we have you on, we are going to talk about Colorado whiskey. There's a great Colorado whiskey from 291 Distilleries, and they have this fantastic rye. And I know you and I are both big rye lovers, so I sent you over the rye. So next time we get together, we'll talk about that. And it's great to have you back on the show, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you. Looking forward to it. I'll see you soon.
For show notes on today's episode, please visit www.barrelroomchronicles.com. If you like what you heard, please rate and subscribe to the podcast. If you really liked it and want to show your support, buy us a whiskey through our Ko-fi site. If you work in the whiskey industry or run a whiskey bar or club, and you'd like to be featured on Barrel Room Chronicles, register to be a guest through our website. Thanks for joining me, and until next time, Salajava.
Barrel Room Chronicles is a production of First Reel Entertainment and is distributed by Anchor FM and is available on Spotify, Apple, Google, iHeartRadio, Amazon, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.